I'm Deborah Bakti, and we're going to be talking today about one of your key customer relationships, your residents' families. Now more than ever, having a proactive approach to building trust, respect, and partnership with your families is critical. And I'm going to be sharing more about how you can make that happen. But first, let me share a little bit about me and why I work exclusively in seniors care with building strong family relationships. While working as an executive in seniors care, I became a customer, a resident's family member on 3 different occasions. My first was with my dad after he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia. My mom was struggling to take care of him at home, and after many hospital visits, it became clear that he needed the support of long-term care, where he lived for about 6 months before passing away. It was around that time that my husband, Ty, was having significant health issues. We had already endured over 18 months of just trying to get a diagnosis while having the support of home care and adult daycare. Ty went from needing a cane to a walker to a wheelchair, and he was also suffering from some cognitive deficits. It was becoming painfully clear that caring for him at home was not sustainable at all. And we also had 2 young children living at home with us, and we just weren't capable of providing the safe and much needed care and support. He was put on the crisis list and shortly after that moved into long-term care. Here's a picture of Ty celebrating his 65th birthday at the home where he lived, and this picture was taken 2 years prior to him passing away. I lived the experience of being a resident's wife, advocate, and POA for 4 years with Ty. It was life-changing for both of us, of course, and for me, with knowing more than the average person about seniors care, it sparked a desire in me to help homes with their family relationships, starting at the very beginning. The admission move-in experience. My 3rd time as a resident's family member was with my mom. A few years after my dad died, my brothers and I helped her to move into an independent living retirement home. And health issues started becoming problematic, and it was clear that she needed more assistance than she was getting in the independent living. We moved my mom into assisted living, and this is a picture of my mom, Carol, here in her suite. And she lived there pretty comfortably for about 4 years before passing away in 2019. So after working in seniors care for about 11 years and living the journey on 3 different occasions as a resident's family member, I decided to leave my corporate career and start my own company called Think Breakthrough, so that I could work more closely with seniors care providers to help with the systems and support to help strengthen family relationships so that they could get back the time and energy that they were spending in that reactive firefighting and complaint de-escalation, so that they could do the work that matters, as well as supporting their care team members who can struggle with the difficulties and dynamics of challenging families. I wrote my first book, Recipe for Empathy: 6 Strategies to Transform Your Families into Fans in Seniors Care, which is a way to equip your team members to see the family journey from a different perspective while providing practical tools to use to help connect better with your residents' families. And my latest book, Now What? Managing the Emotional Journey of Long-Term Care for Families, is a program that homes are using as a tool in a bigger strategy that I'm going to be sharing some pieces of that with you today. But first, I want to tell you about a shocking confession that I heard when I was meeting with a group of PSWs, and of course this was pre-COVID. I was in one of my clients' homes helping them to redesign their admission process, and which interestingly enough encompasses over 100 different individual steps. So I'm meeting with this group of about 15 PSWs, and I've given them the big picture overview of what we're doing, why we're doing this, and how important their insight is for us to truly redesign the admission experience so that it's a better, smoother onboarding for both the families and for them, the care team members. So I say to them, I want you to think about the morning when you know that you've got a new resident and family moving into your home. I want you to reflect on how you feel that morning, knowing that you're just about to be meeting your new resident and family. And they all seem to look at me like, wait, what? You want us to talk about how we feel? Yes, I do. And this is so key because, after all, our feelings influence our thinking and our behaviors, right? And yet it's something that we don't typically talk a lot about. So I notice how they're all kind of looking at each other, and I'm not sure if they're wondering, is she for real? Why am I asking this? And I think they were also wondering if they could trust me. So I reiterate the importance of how they can help to change the experience for the families as well as themselves and how that relationship is developed. So they seem a bit more settled. They get down to work. I'd given them some worksheets to be able to write their reflections. And as they're doing that, I notice some are looking at each other's work, what they're writing down, and others are kind of having their sidebar conversations. So at this point, I got to tell you, I'm incredibly intrigued to hear what they're going to share. So I bring them all back together and I say, who'd like to go first? You know how that goes. You hear crickets. So I wait, and I wait, making eye contact with whoever would make eye contact with me. And finally, one of the PSWs in the back of the room kind of slowly puts her hand up like this as she's looking almost for the okay to be able to share. And she puts her hand down and she looks at me and she says, I feel terrible saying this, but sometimes we wish that the new resident doesn't even have a family. And I got to tell you, I have to admit, I was taken aback. I totally wasn't expecting that as a comment. And I also felt my heart sinking for them. To know that care team members feel this way, I felt even stronger about wanting to help so that the staff didn't have to wish away their expectations of getting difficult families who make their work lives, in their words, miserable. There is this narrative that I consistently hear about working with families in seniors care. And I hear this at the executive level, at the home management level, and the frontline level. And it goes something like this. Well, difficult families, they're just another cost of doing business in seniors care. There's really not much you can do about it. Every home has at least one difficult family who makes things really challenging for our managers and staff, and sometimes it's more than one. So you just got to learn how to suck it up, white knuckle through it, and hope for the best. Stay on your guard, document everything. It's never going to change. It is what it is. Difficult families are just another cost of doing business in seniors care. And listen, I get it. I've had my moments on more than one occasion where I am sure I was experienced as a difficult family. And I know from having worked in the business and hearing the stories and now hearing from my clients that difficult families do exist. And it's likely that your home has at least one. In fact, you may be thinking already about that family or those families who would fall into that category of being a difficult or challenging family. And having to deal with the dynamic of that difficult, demanding, challenging family, I've heard described as energy draining, frustrating, and even causes frontline staff to call in sick just to avoid having to see them. And I also want to share some good news. And the good news is this: you can change that narrative. And this is what I want to invite you to think of as a limiting belief that difficult families are just another cost of doing business in seniors care. And by viewing it as a limiting belief, that means that you can change your experience with families and the outcomes that you get. Just for a moment, imagine the time and energy that you can save by not playing defense and having to deal with the complaints and the escalations and the investigation, paperwork, interviews, and all of the time-consuming things that come with a disappointed and angry family member. Imagine being able to preempt all of that by how you start the relationship. Let's look at an operational reality for a moment. In long-term care, the average home has about 50% or half of their residents leave every year. Primarily it's through death, but it can also be through transfer or it's a rehab stay. So that means about half of your residents and families every year are new. In retirement assisted living, the numbers are likely lower. However, admissions or move-ins are still a very key operational process for every seniors care home. I've had clients tell me that they've been doing their admissions the same way for 30 years. It hasn't been a burning platform priority, although they know that they could definitely use some improvement. And for some, they would say a lot of improvement. Settling for a mediocre onboarding experience can actually be setting up you and your staff for more conflict and complaints, which can be lessened or avoided by being more intentional with how you onboard your new families in the first place. So I'm going to be sharing 3 ways. You could think of them as 3 mindset and approach shifts to dispel this limiting belief that difficult families are just another cost of doing business in seniors care. And the first is take the lead and be the guide your families need and want. So you may be wondering, what do I mean by this? In the book, Now What, I share how families feel admission anxiety when they're moving their loved one into your home. I can still remember, and it's been 10 years, that knot in the pit of my stomach the morning I drove Ty to his new home. The home where I knew he was going to live until he died. The PSW's shocking confession of wishing that their new residents don't even have a family, that is their version of admission anxiety. When you decide to be intentional with this, to take the lead and be the guide your families need and want, you're stepping into your power position. And by that, I mean this. You know so much about your home and your people, processes, policies, protocols, the whole shebang. You know your home probably better than the back of your hand. You understand seniors care, how it works, and I bet you have probably seen it all with residents and families. You understand so much that sometimes it's hard to see it with fresh new eyes. It can be kind of like sitting in the jar and not seeing the label that's on the jar. Most of your families are coming into your home and this new role as a residence family member without a playbook. And they are experiencing a lot of conflicting emotion. And this is likely the first and maybe the only time that they're bringing a loved one to live in seniors' care. It is a huge life change. That's likely something that they never, ever imagined that they'd have to be doing. But now the necessity of it has made it a reality, and not by wanting, right? But by need. They may not realize it, but they're really wanting to be validated that this decision was absolutely the right way to go, and that their loved one is in good hands with you and your team. They don't want to feel regret about this heart-wrenching decision. So by taking the lead and being the guide, you can help to close this knowledge gap that exists and help ease some of the angst and anxiety that they're likely feeling about this decision. Now, one of the biggest barriers or objections I hear from clients about this is admissions. They already take a lot of time in an already busy day. Sometimes we're having to squeeze it into a crazy, hectic day. We just don't have time for all of that. And I challenge you to think about it this way. When you invest the time up front by investing in the relational bank account, you are saving multiples of time and energy in the long run when you avoid the drain that can come, again, both with emotions and with time. The drain that happens with the conflict and the complaints and the escalations and all of the drama that comes with that. As well, with the Now What book, it can do some of the heavy lifting for you. It's written for families as a resource to help them ease into this new role, not only with helping them through that emotional journey that they're on, but with practical information about long-term care. For example, there's a chapter that outlines 20 different misconceptions that families typically have that can lead to the disappointment and frustration because the families don't know what they don't know when they start this journey. When you decide to take the lead and be the guide, you can be very intentional with how your families are onboarded. A big step in taking the lead is around expectations. The common factor with families getting upset and going reactive is typically unmet expectations, which then lead to the disappointment, frustration, anger, and all of that world of hurt that I know you're very familiar with. When you take the lead, this means that you are taking the time to clarify, adjust, and manage expectations right from the start. And let's remember that expectations is a two-way street with what they expect from you and what you expect from them. You can teach your families how to treat you and your care team members as they're now citizens of your community. In the 7 A's chapter, one is about being accountable. And your families are responsible for how they show up and interact in your home with your team. Their attitude and actions impact your culture. And it's something that I speak directly to them about because a lot of times they don't have that awareness that how they're showing up, the energy that they're bringing into the home has this ripple effect onto your culture. The second shift is change the narrative. So we need to remember that families are coming in with their own narrative, right or wrong, about long-term care. This narrative is typically developed through experience, stories that they're hearing, and of course, the media. And certainly through 2020 and even now with all of the incredible negative media coverage and blanket statements about all seniors' care homes, the narrative has become even more negative. And even before COVID, there were perceptions issues that I'm sure that you've heard before. First, that seniors' care is seen as the last place that people want to move their loved one to. And also, and particularly baby boomers experience this, is that we start projecting onto ourselves what it would look like if we one day have to be moved into long-term care. Second, most families really don't understand seniors' care, and the information that they do have is likely skewed and inaccurate. And third, most families feel that incredible grief and guilt and a lot of anxiety about what they see as the forced decision, something that they've needed to do because of illness and aging, but they don't really want. So they're coming in already with resistance and fear, and COVID has only amplified that resistance and fear. So one way to change the narrative is to be curious and to ask your families, what do you know about long-term care? What are you most worried about? What are you most looking forward to? These types of questions help you to understand their narrative so that you can then customize your response and approach to best meet them where they are, with what they know, with what they don't know, with where their emotional state is, so that you can close both the knowledge and the emotion gaps that likely exist. It can also be helpful to clarify and help them understand and perhaps remember or recall why this move was needed in the first place. And yes, this may be suboptimal for them, as most people would much prefer that their loved ones are able to age in place, age at home, and not have to deal with some of the health challenges and complexities that happen. But here we are with the realities of the situation, right? And there would have been things that would have driven their decision to get to where they are today. Another way is to step into your confidence and your competence. Families really do, generally speaking, want this to be successful. And actually, speaking of that, that's a great question to ask your families. What does success look like with this move and your partnership with us? Families are counting on you to have the competence to care for their loved one. And when you're able to show this in your narrative, as well as how you communicate with confidence and compassion, then you can impact and influence whatever story it is that they have created in their mind about seniors' care and what this means to them as a family. You can help to influence and reshape that story that they're telling themselves. Remember, they were likely struggling with the care that they were either providing at home or worried about what could happen if they didn't have a higher level of care. While there'll be lots to check off on that pro side of the list, there are going to be cons or losses that the family or the loved one will experience by making that move from independent living, for example, to living in a community setting. And I believe that it's okay. In fact, I recommend that there's a frank discussion about that. Here's all the benefits, and here are some things that you may be feeling less happy about. And maybe it's the timing of meals, or the restricted visitations, or another resident that their loved one just doesn't seem to get along with. No situation is perfect all of the time. And I believe it's better to have the heads up as to what may be seen as suboptimal so that expectations can be better managed. And finally, the third shift is build your culture on the way in, one family at a time. As mentioned earlier, new residents and families are a key operational process that happens likely every week in your home. If you think longer term, if about half of your resident and family population changes every year, then theoretically within 2 to 3 years, you could have a home with residents and families that you have taken the lead with. That you have had a family relationship strategy that you used to be more intentional with how you bring them into your home. You've been able to clarify, adjust, and manage expectations to avoid the landmine of complaints and escalations that can happen. You've been able to support your frontline staff with the admission anxiety to ideally lessen or eliminate that fear, so that they too can be confident, competent, and compassionate guides for their new family. The third shift is really about deciding that it is possible to impact and influence the culture of your home by being more intentional and designing a family relationship strategy that focuses on, well, the relationship with the family. Dispelling the belief, the myth that difficult families are just another cost of doing business in seniors' care. Because when you shift your thinking about that, you are empowering you yourself and your team to take different actions and to feel more open and excited about the opportunities that you can create with them. It really comes down to designing an onboarding experience with the intention for connection with your families. So you may be wondering, how does the Now What book help with these shifts? This book was written with the families in mind as the readers, the ones who will benefit from the insight and the information that I share, not only as someone who has walked in their shoes 3 times, but as someone who also knows the business of seniors care. And I also wrote this book for you, for people who work in seniors care and really want to have better, more positive relationships with families, where there's a care team approach as partners in care with the families, where there's the trust and respect that is so critical, quite frankly, for any relationship to be healthy and to exist. My clients who are using the Now What book are gifting a copy to new family members as part of their family relationship strategy. They recognize the heavy lifting of insight and information that the book does for them and gives them a way to having a more intentional, productive, and relevant conversation with their families. So by allowing the book to do some of the heavy lifting for you, by giving families both information and insight so that you don't necessarily have to, that saves time for both you and your staff as well as the family. The admission day and all of the transactional parts of a move is very time consuming. As I mentioned before, in my process mapping experience, it's well over 100 different individual steps. The family, as you probably have observed, are in information and emotion overload. Yet, how you start that relationship, the foundation you build with them is critical to that relational bank account. So not only do you have time constraints, sometimes there are topic constraints. There may be things that create discomfort in having to share, like the time frame for cleaning out the room when a resident passes away, which is one of the 20 misconceptions that I cover. I get to be the voice that has walked their experience and knows the business, and talk about accountability and their role as a family member and the level of responsibility with this new role as a new member of your community. I pull back the curtain and give them a clearer picture of all the many moving parts with new residents moving in that they don't see, so therefore they can't really fully appreciate and understand. Like how the care team members also feel admission anxiety, like they do, but for different reasons. And there's a chapter called What's Your Family Flavor? And I share how there's typically 3 different types of family flavors, one of them being a jalapeno. And I'm sure you can guess what type I'm talking about there. I actually debated whether I was going to include this for the families to read, and yet I really felt it was important to, again, help families to understand how significant their presence, their energy, their attitudes, and their behaviors impact the overall culture and well-being of the home, which involves care team members, other families, and of course, the residents. I was just on a call last week with a group of homes, and one of the administrators shared how they'd given a copy of Now What to one of their new family members. It was a brother and a sister who had just moved their mom into their home in long-term care. And the sister called the administrator to tell her that she'd read the book and wanted to declare that she's a jalapeno. And what was so interesting was that they both actually kind of laughed about it. And the sister said, listen, when I'm having a jalapeno moment, all you have to do is call my brother and he'll straighten me out. And, this quick conversation gave the administrator some great insight into what to expect and how they were able to share that common language and actually find the humor was a great deposit into that relational bank account. Then another person on the call shared that they had just moved their 95-year-old grandmother into long-term care. And she recognized from reading the book that she too could be a jalapeno family member. And this is somebody who's worked in long-term care for 25 years, and yet she saw from reading the book a different perspective being on the other side of the relationship. So I was curious and I asked her, so tell me, what would be an example? What would make you go all hot and spicy? And she replied, personal care. It's really important to me that my grandmother's hair is done and her teeth are brushed. And if she looks unkempt, then that would really upset me. And you know what? That is great to know. That may not be a hot button for all families. And by being able to ask families right up front, what's important to them? What would upset them? It gives you great insight into specifically for them. I've written a series of chapters in the book that covers the 7 A's, which one family called the heartbeat of the book, because it walks them through the emotional journey from awareness all the way through to appreciation, to give them language around their emotions and tools to help better manage them so that ideally they have less jalapeno moments, have a bit more of the sweet and savory moments, and can at least recognize where the unregulated emotion is coming from. I've had family members readers tell me that they hadn't really thought about the impact on the care team member side and could better empathize and understand the challenges that they feel as well. And you know what? We're all people, we're all human beings. I think we can all use some help when it comes to reacting less and responding more. We can get reactive when we feel triggered by somebody else's actions. I kind of call it when we go reactive. And it could be something as simple as a body language like a passive-aggressive eye roll or comments that are dripping in sarcasm and anger. I know as a family member, when I had my jalapeno moments, it was absolutely fueled by emotion. And sometimes, if not most of the time, those emotions were disproportionate to the situation because I was dealing with my own grief and guilt and frustration and inability to fully accept the reality of the situation. In Now What, I share some insight into this so that families can build their own awareness around how they either react or respond to situations and how their choice of reacting or responding can either help or hinder the relationship that they're developing with you and your care team. And let's face it, we can all use some help and practice with responding more. And that's why I also included a chapter about PORCH, which is an acronym and a tool to help improve our ability to respond, and with that, create better outcomes for everyone. So if you're looking for a way to be more relational, to start the relationship with your families in the best possible way, let me summarize the key takeaways. 1, challenge yourself with this limiting belief that you may have difficult families are just another cost of doing business in seniors care. 2, decide that that's not serving you or your care team or your families or your residents. 3, shift your approach and mindset so that you take the lead and be the guide that your families need and want. Change the narrative and build your culture on the way in, one family at a time. If you'd like to learn more about the Now What book and program, you can find me here. And if you'd like to receive a copy of the Now What book summary, I've just created it so that it summarizes the key highlights in every chapter. Just email me at deborah@deborahbakti.com, and I'll be sure to send it right over to you. I look forward to connecting and being of support as you build your culture on the way in, one family at a time. Thank you.